So I want to start off talking about what goes through your mind every morning you wake up. And when you think about the state of the country, what weighs heavy on you right now?
Obviously, the virus and the number of our citizens that are affected by it, and those that have been affected by it. I think about the loss of life, and to tell you the truth, I think about my mama and my husband, and what would life be like if they were stricken with the virus.
What has Congress failed to do, and what has Congress gotten right when it comes to the coronavirus?
Well, I believe what they have failed to do is to come together in a unified force and put forward to our citizens that we have this, we can handle this. We're unified in our fight to overcome this pandemic that has overtaken us. And that is where I see that they have fallen short. And what have they done right? I think in passing the initial legislation that provided income for the many families and workers that had absolutely nothing to do with being out of work and the financial calamity that has overcome them.
When it comes to your competitor, Representative Hudson, what has he gotten right and what has he gotten wrong when it comes to coronavirus?
Well, let me say that what I think that he has gotten wrong is the need to stand up and to fight for all of the citizens in the 8th Congressional District and North Carolina that are without health care coverage. In the face of this, we need to make sure that as many of our citizens as possible would be covered with health care. And so now would be the time for North Carolina to expand Medicaid coverage so that we could make sure that roughly 500, 600,000 more of our citizens would be covered with health care. And it would be great if Hudson would stand up and say, look, we've got to get as many people covered as possible. It would also be good if Representative Hudson would encourage the Republican administration to drop the lawsuit that is seeking to repeal the Affordable Care Act. It is absolutely wrong to be standing in the way or taking any action or failing to take action to make sure that as many of our citizens as possible would be covered with health care. And so it's downright sinful in the face of a pandemic not to take such actions. And so
your district, if you were to win, includes Fort Bragg. The state of military housing, certainly an issue. What would you do to help improve it?
Well, let me say that I spent years on Fort Bragg, attended school there, lived on the base, as a matter of fact, in Hammond Hills, in the non-commissioned officers' housing. And so I know of something about the housing there. Many of those units at this time have a good bit of age on them. Other units have been built, but they have some problems. And so there was a time when maintenance was handled by the government and an operation that was fully funded and maintained right out there. And so the service, the maintenance was quick. One of the things that we could do is re-examine whether issuing to private contractors that business is the right decision, and if it is the right decision, whether we have sufficient oversight in connection with that.
You were the first African-American woman on the North Carolina Supreme Court. You were also appointed by President Obama to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. From your experience, what can we do, what do we do to fix the inequalities in the justice system and in law enforcement?
Let me say that during my tenure on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and I served as vice chair there, we undertook a number of studies, investigations, and issued reports. One of the reports that I'll highlight dealt with modern policing practices. And in that report, we made specific recommendations or findings and then recommendations. One of the findings that we made was that while there was no specific data that we could look at, there was sufficient anecdotal evidence that if you were African American, if you were a member of the LGBTQ community, and if you were a member of the disability community, if you were involved with an interaction with law enforcement, there was a greater chance that there would be the excessive use of force. And so we issued recommendations in connection with modern policing. One of the recommendations was that we do collect the data in connection with excessive use of force, that there is currently no law that requires police departments to collect that data. We made specific findings that when there is a problem with a law enforcement officer, that there's no place where another agency could go and find out. The bottom line is that I was pleased to see that the U.S. House in their Justice in Policing Act that they passed, many of the recommendations that the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights had issued years earlier were picked up. And so it's good to see that. I say all of that to say that my experience on the commission, I think, uniquely suits me for this time in our nation's history as we are dealing with the need for criminal justice reform and the racial inequalities that are just so clear at this time.
When you hear the phrase defund the police, it means different things to different people. What's your definition of what you think it means, and where do you stand on that?
Well, I don't know. I didn't coin the phrase, and so I don't have a specific definition. I guess what I would say is that just because we've always done policing a certain way doesn't mean that we have to always do it that way or that we have to continue it. I believe the time has come to look and to see what areas that we could improve, and so thus reimagine how policing might take place in this time in our nation's history.
Probably the most important thing for North Carolinians to do in order to get their fair share is to fill out the census form. You worked for the census.
I did.
Early in your career.
I did.
What is your thought on the status of the census, the effort to take the census throughout North Carolina today? We've certainly heard a bit of controversy out there. How do you think it's going?
Well, the information that I'm getting, Russ, is that North Carolina is not responding in the numbers consistent with, or the percentage consistent with our nation, that we are below that. And that is only going to harm North Carolina. We all know just how critical that census information is and will be over the next 10 years as it regards particular funding in essential programs.
When we look at the economy here in North Carolina, it's not in the best shape since the coronavirus. A lot of people out of work right now, and a lot of jobs won't come back. Are there any particular initiatives that you would take to Congress and put forth to get people back to work or help people reinvent what their next step is?
Well, I think that one of the things that we could do would be consistent with recommendations coming from Vice President Biden and the Harris team, and that is that investing in minority and small businesses. We know that they are the ones most harmed at this particular time. And so I say we invest, we put money in nonprofit groups that can then help get the money to where it is needed. You know, it would help. A lot of people are going to need to be retrained. And as good as North Carolina is with community college, it's still costly. And so I believe that we can and should look at investing more money into our community college systems so as to make that education as affordable as possible. Something else that we might do is offer incentives, the government offer incentives to business to increase their support for training programs and internships and other types of efforts like that.
My last question to you, it's a bit of a free-for-all. Tell the folks in your district why they should vote for you. Sell it.
I'm Pat Timmons-Goodson, and I'm running for Congress in the 8th Congressional District to fight for you, to be a voice for you. Your present congressman hasn't done that. Pat Timmons-Goodson will do that. I will go and fight for health care so that as many of our citizens can be covered with affordable, accessible health care. I'll not be standing up and trying to take health care away from. I'll be fighting to expand Medicaid so as to catch up and to include as many of our citizens as possible. And in the eastern part of the district where we have Fort Bragg, I'll fight for you. I am a former military dependent. I know the sacrifices that our military makes, and I will be present and accountable for you in those instances. I'll be present and vote for the extension of our funding bill. I'll be there to argue for additional funds when need be. Vote for Pat Timmons-Goodson and you'll not be sorry.
Thanks so much for spending some time with us.
You've been kind, Russ. Thank you.